Hi,
Hey,
everybody.
everybody.
Welcome, welcome, welcome to Living Your Awakening.
So do you find that you keep saying no to situations and that the same situation keeps just popping up over and over again for you? Today we're going to talk about how you can learn to change this thing permanently.
Mhm. So, we just want to welcome you so much to Living Your Awakening. This is our show number 13. And this is a show where we offer you guys conversations and tools to help you self empower yourself, follow your truth, follow your heart, and embody your awakening. And I'm Gem Rose.
I'm Michael Anderson.
And we're going to talk about this foundational no. And we first want to say we've had a bunch of technical difficulties, which is why we're running late. And we're kind of like a deer in the headlights right now because we've been like running around getting everything ready for this live show. So thank you for your patience for hanging out. And we're just going to dive right in to this foundational no.
I guess before we do that, I do want to talk about how you can interact with us. Um, we can't do any interaction with Facebook or YouTube, which actually today I don't know if they're even streaming because we were having technical
Mhm.
difficulties on that front. The show, of course, will be up tomorrow at 10 a.m. Eastern time for a replay. If you're on Zoom now, but in the future, if you're watching this on YouTube in the future, if you want to interact with us, go to our website livingyourawakening.com and register for free to join the conversation. There you'll get a Zoom link, and there you can ask questions and interact with us.
Yeah, we love interacting with you
Yeah.
guys. You guys are like half the show or even more than half the show. So we share, our topics. And then when you guys ask your questions and just share your own experiences of what we're talking about, it just makes the whole show. So at any point, what we're going to do is we're going to talk first about this topic. And then you can raise your hand really at any point, and I'll see your hand raised. And if you're calling in from the phone, you can press *9, and that will raise your hand. And you can also type anything that you want to share, or if you have questions in the Q&A as well. So let's just dive right in, you guys, to this foundational no. What does that mean? So when you have situations or relationships or work or whatever it is going on in your life and it keeps happening over and over and over and over, and you're like, no, I've said no. Why they keep happening is because some parts of you are still saying yes. And to get really, 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 in the Matrix, they say balls to bones, right? Balls to bones, no. Of when you're really, really done with something. You can feel it all the way through your entire being. And it can be so simple. Like when that no really happens all the way through, it's like this feeling of just simplicity and alignment. And you're like, I'm just done. And before that happens, we're just not done. So we want to talk with you guys today about if you're going through certain situations and you've worked really hard to say no, but they keep happening. We want to talk to you about what do you do about this? How do you deal with this? How do you get to your foundational no? So I want to give like a quick example of what a foundational no is and what it's not. So often my examples are relationship based because that's where I could say 99.9% of my learning is through relationship. So a long time ago, I was dating this guy and I ended it, and I was living in this little town in Massachusetts. This was, I don't know, 15 years ago. It was a while ago. And I said, I don't want to be with you anymore. And I would see him in town and he would come up and talk to me. And I'm like, I told you I don't want to like be together anymore. And then I'd see him the next day. It didn't matter where I was. I'd run into him and he'd come up and start talking to me. And I was like, dude, like I broke up with you. Why are you still coming up to me? And I could feel, because it kept happening and happening and happening, I could feel this part of me that liked it. I could feel this part of me that wanted to still engage with him. I could feel this part of me that was still turned on by him, still like interested, even though I didn't want to be with him anymore. But I had all these parts that actually still wanted to be with him. And that was really hard to be honest with myself and start digging in deeper of, okay, I say I don't want to be with him, but he keeps, no matter where I am in town, he keeps showing up. No matter how strong I say no, it doesn't seem to make a difference. And yeah, I was mad and all that, right? But I'm like, I need to look at how am I creating this situation? So I started to do my work and I started to find all these parts of me that were still interested. They were all wounding. Okay. None of them were like my truth. None of them were my heart. But all these parts of me that, had trauma or were needy or were lost, or it was just this like really needy parts of me. And so as I started to heal those, I would still see him in town and I would still have like this other feeling that I was feeling. And one day, and I was so angry like at myself. I'm like, why is this still happening? I keep working on all these parts, but I keep seeing him and I keep feeling the need to be with this guy. So I was really frustrated with my process. No matter what I did, it didn't change anything, it seemed. And then one day he calls me up and he's like, "Do you want to go meet for coffee?" And I was like, and I had to like grapple with myself. And I was like, Okay. And so I was all like judging myself, like, you shouldn't have coffee with him and all of these things. And when I went to go meet him, I had all like my stuff, all the needy stuff was there. And I walked into the coffee shop and I just wanted to be done. I just wanted to say no. And when I sat down and he starts looking at me, all of a sudden, I was like, I'm done. It just ended. And I felt that like balls to bones. Like I was like, holy shit, I'm done. And he's like looking at me in the way that he normally would. And his eyes, like he said something to me and I didn't bite. I was just like, I don't want to, or no, or I don't remember what I said. I just knew, like, I did not react in how I was reacting all those months. And I saw his eyes, like they got really confused. And I'm like, I'm thinking to myself, wow, I have nothing in me wants him anymore. And that was the last time I saw him, and that was it. And I was like, huh, that's my no. That's my no. So that's like one example, shorter, I mean, longer than I wanted to talk about it. But that's one major example for me of I wanted to say no, but I had all these parts that were wounded and they weren't ready. And until I actually dealt with those, the relationship just kept happening. But once I actually dealt with them, and this was over months, it wasn't just like a day or a couple of weeks. I dealt with these over months and I would see him every day. It would be like 10 o'clock at night, raining. I went outside to go for a walk and there he is. I'm like, what is going on? So that's just one example of my foundational no, to really say no and really mean it all the way through. So
Well, what I
that's
want to
something.
talk about too with this is just kind of like where does this issue show up in your life? Because I think that's important to talk about. And the reality is with this is that this can show up. Um, I mean, generally speaking, you really notice this sort of foundational no shows up in relationships, and it's all relationships: lover relationships, partner relationships, career relationships,
Work.
work
Yeah.
relationships,
Everywhere, really.
everywhere. It's usually those. It's the interactions that really point this out, right? And it also will show up too, also in your career, your sort of job experience, or also in your feelings. Like if you feel sad or whatever, you'll notice this. Or a lot of times where this foundational no becomes really important, more important, it's actually critical, is like when you're on your spiritual path and you're really working on the energetics of something. Kind of like if you're dealing with a curse or you're dealing with some sort of other energetics, in order to really complete that, it has to be that foundational, that real, it has to be that real no. Otherwise it won't complete, you know? So that's so I just wanted to bring that in. And I think the story I've been talking to about lately, because it's been top of foot instead of front of mind for me, is I've been dealing with this gout in my toe. And I just with that, it's been layer after layer after layer after layer of um really getting clear. What I was really finding, and I've talked about that last time, and I've talked about that on a couple other podcasts, Three Intuitive Healers podcast, is the really me getting to the foundational no is no matter what this is, the no is I don't want this anymore. And I'm gonna do whatever it takes to figure out whatever I need to do to turn on whatever I need to turn on to clear whatever I need to clear. But foundationally, I got to the point because of the pain of this thing to be like, even though there's 100,000 layers, it feels like that I'm a foundational no, that I just don't, I'm unwilling to have this anymore.
Yeah, it's like it gets to this point where you put up with something and you put up with it and you put up with it. Even in those stages, we can be like, God, I don't want this anymore. I don't want this anymore. But we like keep putting up with it until something shifts in us and we're like, okay, I really don't want to put up with this anymore. And it's like it deepens, right? And there's a it's layered of how we get to this really deep foundational no in us. And it's truly a self-empowering journey because whenever I say no to something and it keeps happening and I dig in deeper of like, okay, where in me is still saying yes to this experience? And I learn all these things about myself of whether it's some sort of past life part of me that shut down and just hasn't turned back on yet, or it's childhood wounding, or it's trauma, or it's some part of me that either needs to reactivate, turn back on again, empower myself, say yes to myself. Like it's always an amazing learning that happens when I dig deeper into where in me am I still saying yes to these experiences.
Yeah.
So even though it's super frustrating when you say no and it keeps happening, I want to also spin this as it's actually, there's a lot of self empowerment to be had and a lot of understanding about ourselves to be had about, well, why is this still happening? Because the other side of all this is taking 100% responsibility for our situations on our side of it. We can't control what somebody else does. But when something's in my life that isn't so savory or I don't like it or whatever, I'm like, what is my piece in this? How am I creating this? And it's really hard to be that responsible because I want to be like a little brat and like bitch and moan and like this sucks and I don't like this. And like every time Michael and I to go to sit to do this is like an experience like that happens for us every other Tuesday when we go to sit and plan this show, this heavy energy, this darkness comes in and it just tries to mess with us. And we get argumentative with each other. We get sleepy. We get frustrated. And because we've been doing the show for 13 times now, every single time we're like, oh, like this isn't us. I don't want this. Where before, when we first started doing it, we can get really argumentative with each other. And so it just felt like we're being frustrated and I want to do the show this way and I want to do the show that way. But the more we start, it's like the wholer, if that's a word, we get in ourselves, not just Michael and I, but all of us, the wholer we get every time we sit and we do the show, we're like, I don't actually want to feel this way. I want to feel like in partnership with you
Yeah.
and like joyous about this. And like this energy just messes with us hardcore and it knows exactly where to mess with us. And so I use that as of an example of every other week, I get stronger and stronger and stronger to be like, I just don't want this.
Right.
And we've both noticed over the last, uh, we've been doing this 13 weeks now. So like what is that, 26 weeks, right? So over the last 26 weeks, when we go to plan the show, that energy has gotten less and less and less and less and less and less. And
Well,
so
because our foundational no
because our foundational low is
is
getting bigger
getting
and
bigger and
bigger and
bigger and
bigger.
bigger, it really is inverse, and the scale really is tipping on that.
Yeah, like, do I really wanna be argumentative with Michael? Do I really wanna be in separate camps? My wounding does, but
Sometimes, yeah.
but I don't. So, it's always like everything we talk about is because 'cause we're experiencing it firsthand, right? And it's like, it just feels really important to share.
Well, yeah, that's we've said this before, but literally each week we tune in to see what the most pressing topic is, the most relevant topic for the week is, and because we have a whole list of we have hundreds of topics, and so we tune into the list or just tune into what's going on to bring forth what is the most relevant. And I think for a lot of people, because I think a lot of people that we get reporting on is they'll say, "Well, I said no, but this person or this situation just keeps showing up, or I have this energy that's in my space, but it's not leaving, and why?" And I think foundationally, what we want to leave you with is if that energy, let's say that's in your space, that you keep saying no to, and it's still there, some part of you
Wants to play.
wants to play.
Yeah.
It's some part of you is saying yes. Even maybe it's just 1% or a half a percent is still saying yes. And that still leaves that gap for that to come in.
And what's interesting too about, like, energy and spirituality and stuff is, like, it's kinda like physics. It's what weighs the most. So, when we have certain parts of us that say yes, and they're, quote, "overweighing the no," those parts of us those parts of us are the significant parts. We don't 100% have to heal every single part of us in order for this no to manifest. But there's significant ones, however, that we need to heal or be aware of or understand. And what's so fascinating about our own journeys is like our minds don't know, well, which ones are the significant ones and which ones don't weigh as much. And that's what's so fascinating. Like you could feel like a really strong emotion, and the mind can be like, oh, this one is really significant. And it may not be. There may be something completely different that's actually more significant than what we're feeling. And so it's not like this list of things that you or me could be like, these are all the things and these are all the parts that must be healed in order for the foundational no to manifest. It's your significant ones. And we don't mentally know what those are. And how we know what those are is to continue inquiring to be like, okay, what parts of me are saying yes? And in each situation, those parts will be your significant ones. Like, why is like my 2-year-old part of me significant in a certain way with certain areas that changes things when I heal with her and I be with her versus if I do that for other issues, it doesn't really do anything, you know? It's such a I don't want to say it's a mystery. It's a mystery to our minds, but our true self, our wisdom, our knowing knows exactly what parts of us are creating situations. And they're not always what we think. And it's so interesting to just kind of leave our mind at the door, let's say, and be really curious of what in me is still saying yes to this energy. Another like simple example for me is when I'm meditating, this energy will come in and I'll be like, ugh. And I can feel in that very moment, some part of me is paying attention to it versus just being like, here comes the energy and I don't care. I'm staying rooted in myself. And so that's another example of like, I watch an energy will come in to bother me, let's say, just as I'm getting into something really important. It'll come in and it'll bother me. And then I'll look and then I'll be like, nope. And then I'll look again and I'll be like, nope. And I'm like, okay, here it is. Why am I more interested in this energy coming in to bother me versus what I'm dealing with right now in my meditation or myself? And so that's when I get to ask, why am I still interested in this? What is going on? And I get to learn something about myself. And then later on, it'll happen again, but it's really different because I've shifted that piece of me. So I feel like we can give a lot of examples, but we also want to hear from you guys too. Like,
Mhm.
what are you dealing with that you've said no to that keeps coming? What is your experience about this? And simply put, because we've said a lot of kind of different things, how you get to your foundational no is to continue being honest with yourself, that if you say no and something is still happening, is to continue to ask, what in me is still saying yes? And then you meet with that part of you, you listen, you work with that part of you, and you just keep going. It can be layers and it can be just one thing. But how you know is that the situation has changed, or you feel really different inside next time the situation is there. So it's like, it's very measurable. Like for me with that guy, I didn't see him ever again. Like that was crazy.
Right.
That was really measurable. Like my no was just crystal clear. It was done. I didn't have all those needy parts anymore. It was done. And what was interesting about that too is like I thought I was getting nowhere because I was working on all of them. And yet in one fell swoop, they all went. And I'm like, okay.
Right.
So,
I think that's the key thing with this, and we've said this before. I've said this before. Is this stuff is measurable,
mhm,
right? It's the same thing like when you're doing energetic work on yourself, and you're looking like last time we talked about implants, or we talked about you have some sort of binding that's involved, and when you bring your awareness in there, and you really get to that foundational no, and it's like you're at that spot where you have that calm no, and it's real and it's honest. You can actually watch that energy. You can watch that shift. Right? It is measurable. You can actually see the effect of that. You can actually feel this thing go, and you can actually see the results of it as it's left.
well, when we too, like when I talk about like this thing that bothers us when we're trying to
Mhm.
create our show, for me, like today, it was more measurable because of just where I'm at on my path. And like when it came in, I noticed it so much faster because I'm like, I actually don't feel argumentative at all. Like, wait. And so just, and like something deeper was more like, I don't want this. I don't want to have this experience anymore. Where weeks ago, it wasn't like that. I had to like, it's just
Right.
so fascinating to just feel your own, even if it's just a little niggle of a difference, that there's a difference, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's important. I think that's important because you can just what you're talking about is you can gauge the progress, right?
Just by how you feel.
Yeah, just by how you feel, you can notice. And like I said, once you reach that foundational no, you can literally watch you'll watch these things, you can watch these things unwind and then feel the difference of that once they've unwound. Right.
Hmm.
That's why this topic is so important because a lot of people they're doing the work, but they're really spinning their wheels because they're not digging deeper to like really be honest with themselves to really um get to that foundational, foundationally, am I really a no for this?
For
Because that
reals.
for reals, because that takes some real courage and real honesty to be able to ask that and go that deep. And sometimes, it takes practice. Sometimes it takes practice to know you go through a situation. I talked about this before, is you post game it, you go through experience, and then after it's happened, then you kind of go back and you sort of review the feelings, you review what happened for you, and that gives you a lot of information in terms of that's when you notice the little niggles or like, yeah, maybe it wasn't like a real maybe there's a part of me that wasn't really a no. And that's where you can then, if you can't do it in the moment, at least after the fact, you can go back and you can find what that feels like. And then you can have that again, the spiritual
Mm-hmm.
sommelier. You can know what that flavor is, what that frequency is, so that way you can remember that. So when you run to that again, then you have that as a reference point. And I think that's the thing that again, I find that for myself, that's a very kind of masculine point of view, and use that masculine energy. This is where you can do that comparison and contrast.
And how do you not judge yourself either? Like the parts that are still a yes. So presently we can be a no, but our hurt parts are still a yes. And how do you just know there's nothing wrong? There are past parts of you or there are older parts of you that have their needs and their desires. And presently it doesn't match anymore. So how do you reconcile, right? It's just this, it's like this gentle, and it takes so much time, I think, to quote, get there with yourself of like being gentle and being loving and being kind, not because you're trying to be gentle, loving, and kind, but because you've been on this path for a while, right? And it kind of wears you down in a way. And you're like, well, I've judged myself 50,000 times. That didn't work. And something just clicks or something just starts happening where you just, it's like you want to be kind to yourself. And so, like for me, like when I'm in meditation and I feel this part of me is like wanting to work on this thing that's coming in versus just like, I don't want anything to do with you. I have to be loving and welcoming to the part of me that is interested. And
Well,
plus, it can,
that's a choice.
what part? To be loving or?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the thing is that's a choice. So you can choose, not to sound cliche, you can choose love. But it does really matter. I mean, again, the choices, like even these little subtle choices of really wanting to know the truth or choosing to be kind to yourself, and it really matters. And even just sometimes it's necessary to like literally, beyond thinking it, to actually sort of speak it to yourself, right? I mean, do what's necessary to,
Welcome.
yeah, to welcome this thing
Mhm.
and to have it be. If you need to even write it down, there's sometimes some of these things are really hard for me, and I'll actually write a sentence down to help me like be really clear and be really focused and clear about like what my intention is. And I think all those techniques are really good. If you're, sometimes it's just easy, so you just do it, right? Sometimes it's not so easy. So then if you need to speak it, if you need to write it, or just remember the fact that, hey, I'm choosing to be kind with myself. I recognize the pattern to be judgmental,
Mhm.
self-judgmental about this, right? I haven't got this yet. So like what the hell is going on? But just to have that space and choose the kindness, choose the self-love and give yourself space. And the same thing with like the post game too, is that you can again set the intention that, hey, I'm doing this not to be perfect, but this the idea that I learn, right? And that way I sort of understand the flavors. So that way when this comes up in the future, that I'm more aware. It's really that's really that's what the path is about, right? You do the best that you can do, and then you try to learn from what's going on. So then you can the next time you encounter it, that you can, you know, do it a little bit better.
Well, and for me, when I simplify it too, of like what this awakening path is, is I have present me that is in the midst of awakening, and then I have my past self, and these two things constantly reconciling. It's as simple as it is. Or I have my identity self that I still feel like I am, that's reconciling with my awakening self. And so that's why we have a yes and a no,
Well, and
right?
the other side of it too is again, we have, many of our episodes we're talking about a part of our discernment tool series. And the other really important question with this is to ask yourself, again, when you're having these feelings, is how much of these feelings are yours? Right? So like you can really just set aside, put down the bags that are not yours and really
Mhm.
deal with the bags that are actually yours. And so so if, I would recommend just going back and taking a look at some of the videos that we did, the other episodes where we talked about specific ones like what's actually your energy and what's not your energy. That's just always a good one because that comes up and it's
Mhm.
applicable to everything. But there's really a lot of those things about really, again, this whole process of really getting to know yourself, right?
And plus, it's November now. It's the end of November. And we're at the end of the year energies, and they're just intensifying. And so these parts of us that need to reconcile getting ready for 2023 are really up. Like it's really strong. And the negative energies are really up. They're really strong. And we have to really anchor and really feel what's true for us. Like, do I actually want to experience X, Y, and Z anymore? No. And then I get to be with my other parts that are triggered, that are scared, that are, you know, because there's a lot of energy right now, you guys. I know you feel it. Like it's so much to keep up with. So it just adds to everything. Anything else you want to say before we talk
No,
to
I think the other thing,
peeps?
you touched on it, and I just want to bring that back too, is sometimes with these issues, it is really about timing. Sometimes in life, and we talked about that earlier. We've talked about that before. Is sometimes you're working on an issue, and there's a timing to it. You might mentally be like, "I'm done with this," but actually, no. The timing in life is it actually is going to take a certain amount of time for it to actually unravel the way that you need.
Or when you're dealing with your foundational no with another person and you're in this relationship that's still unraveling and unwinding these like really major things, and there may be times that you're like, okay, I just got to call them now and say no, I'm done. And then it takes that deeper honesty to be like, well, is it true to do that right now? Am I actually ready? Is it time?
Right. Yeah, you might
That's a
have
whole
it.
other
It
way
might
to
it
like,
might be like a whole situation where you have a X amount of linear time to actually walk through, and there may be other things that you have to unwind or you have to deal with, or there's a certain amount of uncomfortability that you have to go through in order to complete. So I think that's relevant too. Sometimes that your no, and that's the other side of it. Sometimes you have your foundational no, and there's a timing to where this thing completes. So
yeah,
it might be that you
with the other
have the
person.
no, and I think the thing is, the point is what I'm asking is to dig deep inside of yourself, because you'll feel that. You'll feel like, I do feel complete with this, even though the situation hasn't completed, and I can feel like that there's still this has to play itself out in a particular way. And I think those are all relevant. I think the point what I'm trying to make is you really, if you feel dig deep and you feel deeply into yourself, you'll feel what the real truth is. And just listen to that, really honor that truth. And that's again, I said every episode, and I think that's just really critical, is again, the reason we have these conversations is really to help you fine tune you. This is a journey of you really
Knowing yourself.
knowing yourself, right? And knowing these subtle energies. And that's sort of the beauty of it. Again, that's why I bring it back to that spiritual sommelier, because again, part of drinking wine is, from my point of view, is the all the subtle flavors, right? So again, this isn't just a cold process of, I mean, you could approach it that way, just a cold process of, but it's actually more there. You can actually look at this as a way of an enjoyment, and you can enjoy the process too, right? I think that's really relevant. Sometimes it gets, I know we talk a lot
Frustrating.
about tools, we talk about a lot of really specific things to decode, and I don't want to forget the idea of just being present and just being. Obviously, that's the most important thing, but also just enjoying the process, right? Because a lot of that's perspective.
Yeah. And just like another kind of side note with what you're just saying is sometimes there is no clearing to do. There's nothing to do but just being in yourself, being present, being in your light, just and like that light heals from the inside out. And then sometimes we feel drawn to heal certain things so we can be that light, right? And it's to me, it's always like what's needed in the moment. Sometimes I just want to, I have no desire to heal anything, look at anything, do anything. I just want to be. And then as I'm being, something will come up that needs my attention. And then I deal with it accordingly. And so on this path, there's like, it's like this weird double thing. There's like, as we awaken, as we heal, these different layers keep coming up for us to be with and understand and look at so we can be free in ourselves and how we are with each other and in the ways that we envision or feel in our hearts, right? And then on the other side, there's nothing to do because this beingness is what it's all kind of boiling down to too. So it's this healing is very, it's what's needed in the moment for each of us, on our path of what's necessary. And I hear from so many people just over the years of sometimes you don't want to do anything like for months and months and months. Like I have no desire to go to healing, I have no desire to go to classes, I have no desire to do anything. I just want to be with myself. And then one out of nowhere, one day it just totally switches and you're like, oh, I want to do healing again, or I want to go to classes, or And so I feel like, you know, what you're saying about knowing yourself, I feel like it's so important to ride those waves of like what's needed when. Some
Right.
days you just want to be and not do anything and just be in yourself and feel your own flavors and like know so deeply. And then other days it's like, okay, I'm motivated to release this thing or heal this thing. Or
Right.
so it's just so important because we talk a lot in these shows about processes and tools. And yes, they're helpful, right? And there's also times where you don't need tools. You just need you just sitting. So
Yeah.
it's both.
And also, again, like kind of circle back to it, which is to enjoy the process. Allow yourself to enjoy the process of being a human, being on this human experience, right?
And I think enjoying it gets realer and easier just the longer we're on this path,
Yeah.
right?
Oh, I think it's just it gets realer. I think that's the thing is you can really enjoy. I think there's a richness when you
Mm.
are that present and really know yourself. I think that's the beauty is you're not just skimming across the surface. You're in the weeds and you're actually like really in the thick of life.
Like I remember for me, like before awakening happened, and I would like look at awakened teachers or people who had their awakening, I would have this idea. Like I could have sworn this was real. My idea was when you wake up, you see everything exactly for what it is all the time, and you know the truth of everything and all your feelings and all your issues all the time. And like, that's not so. But I really, really, really thought it was. I thought you are just immediately clear all day long, just just clear. And it's like, actually, it's the
Wah,
opposite because
wah.
all this stuff keeps coming up, right? Yeah, it's crazy. So we want to hear from you guys how you want to, you know, just add to this conversation, what's going on with you, with your foundational no, whatever you want to share.
Or if you have any
So
questions or
yeah.
whatever.
So feel free to raise your hand on Zoom with the little hand icon, or you can press *9 if you're on your phone, and we'll see you there. And Heather wrote, and you can also write in the Q&A as well. Heather wrote, um, mine is seeing through my third eye. It will clear for a hot second and then it fogs back over. I'm like, no more, enough with fogging over so I can't see through my third eye. I do ask, and it's so layered, sometimes feels like never ending, but I know patience is needed to go through all the layers.
So true.
Yep.
Yeah, it's so true.
Like she just said it in a nutshell.
Yeah. I think the thing is if you keep digging deep and you foundationally want to, then you're willing to trudge through the layers, right? And then you just kind of meet it as it comes and just the patience of letting it be patient to like because again, there's a reason why it's shut down, right? This isn't something if it's this complicated, you have to understand is however, whatever the degree of complication it is probably the degree of resistance and pain and suffering and hurt in a past life that built that resistance, right? It tends to be
That's a good
proportional.
one.
So, and the more that you've had lifetime after lifetime after lifetime of pain and suffering around specific issues, you'll notice that those will become your major themes. If you look at thematically in your sort of spiritual life, what those themes are, pretty much guaranteed you're going to look at those and you're going to see lifetimes of that same issue. Kind of that's your lesson to learn, right? That's the kind of the core. Because when it's easy and it just pops off, that's awesome. But
Right.
these deeper themes are sometimes frustrating because they do take time. Yeah.
Yeah, and we can get, as you know, super frustrated of like, I don't want to do this work anymore. Jesus, seriously?
Yeah.
Yeah. So nobody else has anything to say.
So if you do, you want to call in or raise your hand or type a question,
Oh,
please.
Angela's typing.
Angela's
Shireen's
typing.
typing.
Okay.
I mean, Angela just raised her hand. Shireen
Okay.
just typed something. I think I'm going to go to Angela first, and then I'm going to read
Okay.
what Shireen
Yeah.
said.
Please call in. We want to hear
Yeah.
from you.
Okay, Miss Angela. You can unmute.
Oh, hey guys. Hey.
Hey
Hi.
there.
Can you hear me all right?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's good to hear
Awesome.
your
I
voice.
so look forward to seeing you guys every
Aw.
2 weeks.
Oh,
Oh,
thank
thank
you.
you.
Yeah. And I can so relate to your story. I've been married for 38 years to a wonderful man, and communication has always been an issue. And I was talking to this lady a couple weeks ago, and I said, you know what? I can't do this anymore. I don't want this anymore. How can I learn how to communicate with my husband. How can I do this? And she said to me, go and buy this book. It's called Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus.
The
I
80s
don't know
book.
if you've heard of it,
Yeah. Oh,
Of
yeah.
course.
but I got to tell you, I've been practicing the teachings and it's literally working. And I'm like,
Oh,
thank you, Lord.
that's awesome.
That is awesome.
Thank you.
So what do you think got you really ready after all those years? Do you know? Or did something just like
Well,
change?
well, I've been working on myself since 2011. And I've just gotten to a point where something's telling me you need to leave this marriage. And another part of me is like, no, you need to stay. There's something more here for you. There's something for you to learn. And I'm like, I really love this man, but it's been painful. And so you know what? Maybe this communication thing is the answer. I don't know.
Does he feel the same way as you? Like there's something here, even though it's really challenging? Or do you guys talk about that or?
If I talk about it, it's like I trigger him every time.
Right.
So it's very, very hard to talk about this because it's like I'm the celestial spiritual one and he's the earthy guy. He doesn't want to know anything about spirituality. You know what I'm saying? So
Yeah,
yeah.
when you're talking about that too, one suggestion that I have for you too is to spend some time with looking at because this obviously isn't the first go around for you two as a couple in terms of lifetimes. And it seems to me like there's some other lifetimes where you guys have had some trauma as a result of being spiritual together.
Oh.
And that's part of what's creating this communication issue. So that might be something
I
that you can,
agree.
so in
Yeah.
other words, you experience something and like for him, it's so traumatic and like he just shut it down. I don't want to deal with this. And this is something that by you, he doesn't necessarily need to look at it, but by you, this is a case where you lead by example. And by you kind of feeling into what that was. And so you can kind of understand like, is there anything is there anything external that's influencing your relationship to communicate? That's jumping on the actual trauma.
From the
Okay.
past.
From the past. So there was some trauma. I don't know specifically what it was, but that's what it feels like. And I feel like there's other energies sort of jumping on to amplify that. And by you just bringing your awareness and actually looking at that and feeling at it and feeling like what's actually yours, what's not, what is it that you want? Do you still want to feel these feelings from before? And you start to work through that. I think that will actually, in addition to the book, because I think there is something about actually communicating as a woman or as a man to a woman or vice versa. But I think, again, I think a layer of this is in the past.
Yes, I totally agree with you because I've had lots of dreams where he is in my dream and there's a lot of betrayals. So I know we've had lifetimes together before.
Right.
So yeah, I really want to unravel this.
Yeah. And I think that's just a matter of wanting to, and then giving yourself some space to kind of just gently relax into that and kind of see what wants to come. And then just again, kind of feel like with the sort of energy that's creating the separateness to really get clear about, again, what percentage of that's yours. Because I got a feeling a lot of it's not.
Yeah, you're right. I do a lot of muscle testing and I ask myself, okay, what percentages of this is mine? And then I send back whatever's not.
Yep.
And then whatever part is mine, I work on it.
Right. So the proof in the pudding, again, not that you're looking for an outcome specifically, but the proof, if you will, as you work on this and as you disassemble this whole structure, is going to be to just kind of feel and notice how your relationship with your husband and the communication and how that feels different. Because it'll shift. It can't not shift. Right.
Yeah, especially if it's this past life trauma of spirituality. And as you start, like, I don't even have a word, kind of feeling into, like what Michael's saying, kind of feeling into and letting it kind of unravel, how does that not affect him?
Right.
Right?
You
Because
don't have
it's
to do anything to him, just to be clear. Just
right.
do your own work, lead by example silently. If you want us to have a conversation, great. But it's just like if just by you doing your work on it, it's going to start to unravel all this funky because there's funky on top of this. I mean, there's a lot of layers. There's trauma, right? There's society, there's, you know what I mean, there's his family, there's like a lot of layers to it, but there's this sort of it's built on a foundation of something else that happened in another lifetime or could
You're
be
so right,
lifetimes.
you guys. I tell you, like there's the outside influences, and I feel like there's the planetary influences,
Yes.
past life. Like there's
Yep.
so many
there's
Yep.
so
things,
many
But again,
things.
right?
all you can do is again, this is again in the
Mm.
from the feminine point of view is you can kind of sit. This is where John's really great, but I do the same thing is you kind of sit and you can kind of put out the question if that helps and just kind of see what wants to come and then kind of investigate that gently.
All right.
Mm. Thank
Thanks,
you for sharing
guys.
that.
Yeah,
Awesome.
thank you.
It's so vulnerable, man.
Yeah,
Yeah, thanks for listening. Thanks for your
Yeah.
support.
Yeah.
absolutely.
Thank you for being here.
You're
All
welcome.
right, sweets. um, uh, two things I want to say, like with what you were saying and the end of the year energies. I just feel like it's almost like a quiet whisper that's asking us to, I don't have a word for this, to like find ourselves so deeply in what's true for us and like really root.
Yeah, I don't know
And it's
specifically
quiet.
the astrology, but my sense is because I haven't been following. I know there's a lot of stuff happening. My sense is the astrology is if you were is, and I guess those of you who are astrologers want to type in or write in is my assumption based on what I'm feeling is that the planetary energies are really they're squeezing us in this very direction to like really get to know ourselves to like it's they're
Mhm.
like pushing all these things to bring all this stuff up to like look at so we really can truly be ourselves, our true selves. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's like every year it gets more and more and more of that, but it's like different flavors of going within, anchoring within, knowing ourselves, knowing what's really true, owning that. And I was just really feeling that from Angela, what you were saying. It's like underneath it all, or kind of the overview of it all is like as you just kind of like so sweetly find yourself and you're like, ah, it's so much medicine for everything,
Yeah,
you know?
the other thing I want to say to that for Angela specifically, I guess speaking to you specifically, Angela, is I just want to comment on the courage that you have to be in your truth around your relationship, you know, because it's so easy and on today's I'm going to talk about American, even though we have a worldwide audience, to just kind of like feel something and walk away and but to actually not to say that I'm congratulating for staying in the relationship. I'm congratulating, I just want to point out, thank you for just doing what is true for you. If it was true for you to leave, great. Then that I would be congratulating that. So the fact that you're actually feeling the truth and actually following the truth, even though it's not necessarily easy, I just want to applaud that for a second because I think that's, you know, again, these are real life examples.
I was feeling that too. I just wanted to like reach out and be like,
Give her a
oh my
hug.
God, like you're so vulnerable and
Yeah.
powerful.
Yeah.
Because it's such a vulnerable thing to
Yeah. Well, to even
follow
feel,
your truth.
even to feel, to ask the question, right? Making me tear up because it's really beautiful.
It's really
It's because it's
powerful.
really hard. I mean, as you know, if you've watched our show, it's like in our relationship, we've dealt with this very thing and we've been able to
Well,
work through
me,
it. Well, yes, you, but
I
yeah,
dealt with it.
by
You've been
you,
like,
but by you dealing with it, I'm dealing with it.
it's true.
So
Leave her stay, leave her stay,
yeah,
leave her stay,
it's
leave her stay.
hard. You know what I mean? And society, you know, you again, lifetime isn't your best. Not to rag on Lifetime, but it's like television and social media isn't
Oh,
probably
Lifetime TV.
your
Yeah.
best isn't your best uh, guide for what to do with your relationship. And that's like again why we started this whole show is to really talk about like what is your
It's real
truth
experiences.
and how do you navigate this? Because this is like you're not alone. I guess when I say it to you, Angela, it's like you're not alone. It's like I deal with all my clients. This is a very common theme in our relationship. This is life, right?
Well, you reminded me of like the first year we were together, and my heart was so like, I don't even have a word. Yes, or I'm home. And my personality was like, I need this, 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 and this. And I remember the first year was just one of the hardest ones for my personality. And I remember I was traveling somewhere, and I'm in this airport, and I'm on this escalator, and I'm going up, and there's a big, huge ad for perfume or something. And this woman is in this man's arms, and she's like, ah, and he's like, and I was like, oh, that's what I want. And then all of a sudden I'm like, oh my God, that's a friggin' ad. Like, that's not even real. What is wrong with me?
Right. But this is
Oh my
this.
God, it was crazy.
Yeah.
Like, it woke me up out of my stupor of like this thing I'm pining for, this
Yeah.
idea is like ads and TV and, you know,
Yeah, it's fabricated.
and it's not what it is. Maybe for some people it's like that, but I don't know.
Well, I think there are some people who have that kind of. I think there's some people who generally their relationship in this lifetime is that.
It's easy
It's
and
easy, it's
yeah.
light, it's hot, it's all that, and I think that's. I mean, I don't know this statistically, but I think it's a small number. I don't know. We haven't done it. We haven't commissioned a study yet, so maybe we'll start a pay. We'll start a GoFundMe and we'll commission
Right.
a study
Is your
here.
is your relationship fun, sexy, hot, happy all the time, and joyful and
Yes, you never
playful?
have any conflict, and it's
Right.
like I don't
Super
know.
easy.
I don't know.
So I'm gonna read Q&A here. And again, anytime before we end this show, just feel free to raise your hand and we'll talk to you. So Shireen says, that is what that is just what I thought. In every group power session, I would feel like, this is it. And then the next day, I'd think, oh, maybe there's just more layers. Every single time. Now it makes me giggle because I still feel like huge transcendence each session. And it's like,
Yeah.
as like a healer, these are the words that are hardest to convey, because when I'm doing a session and I just see like what you guys are going through and how there's all this truth and all this awakeness, and then there are these layers of the old self, and that's all it is. Like, really, at the end of the day, it's just, if we just simplify it, and it's like layers and layers, but the beauty and the sacredness, and it's like, we don't do healing to, like, even though we do healing to get rid of it, let's say, because that's what kind of happens, that's not our motivation. Like, this is a journey, right? It's kind of like, you don't just take one shower and you're done. You don't just go to the gym once and you're done. You don't just get one oil change in your car. Like, we're on this whole journey, right? And the sessions are to help you on your journey and release the layers and like help you deal with the layers. And it's like a whole different way of approaching healing. And it is really hard to describe
Yeah.
why we do healing like this.
And also, and I'm gonna go back to what I said before, and I don't know. I guess this is what Spirit keeps nudging me to say this. And this part of it is to enjoy the layers,
It's
right?
hard.
Huh?
It's
Oh,
hard.
it's hard. I'm not saying it's easy, but it's a perspective, and just to kind of remind yourself gently of that perspective is to enjoy the process.
It's like, oh, my old me.
It does definitely when I've incorporated that into my situation, it's made going through these hard things a lot easier. It's like the other day when we were the energies were just like swirling around and we were like really kind of struggling, and it's just like, hey, no matter what's going on, let's have a foundation of us being on the same team, even though there's all these energies that are swirling around us. And it's just like sometimes just even stating that simple thing really helps us specifically to be able to navigate together without drifting off into all these other
It's
places.
easy to drift off because
It can be, yes.
for each of us, though, these energies get us exactly where we're
Your
susceptible.
weakness, yeah.
Yeah,
The
your
gap.
weakness. The
That's so
gap,
true.
yeah.
It's so true. Yeah. I mean, exactly. The sore spot gets pushed.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, totally.
The other thing that helps me too is like, like when I'm going through something and I hate it, I'm like, I hate it. I'm like, oh yeah, this too. This too. And it's like it helps me, turn it around for myself. Because shit's not easy, as we all know. It's friggin' hard.
Yeah.
So Baraboa, I hope I say her last name correctly. She says, "Thanks, lovelies. I'm grateful to have you a part of my unwinding." I think that's, yeah, unwinding. I am finding the sooner I get to my no, the more relief there is for both of us. I know that I have indulged in a no true relationship. I don't understand what that means. I know that I have indulged in a no true relationship. If you want to add what that means, can you type back in? Oh, she's raising her hand. Cool. So I'm just gonna Angela wrote, she says, "I'm gonna do some relationship support groups. You guys really inspire me." Oh, that's awesome. All right, I'm gonna go to Barb. You can unmute.
Hello, lovelies.
Hi, honey.
Hey.
What does that mean?
I didn't type. I don't type well, and not true relationships, because when I get to my no, I realize that they naturally fade away
Oh, I see.
because they weren't in genuine in the relationship.
Yeah.
And it was and I didn't see that right away, or I give them the benefit of the doubt. And that's when I get into trouble and I can't get to my no fast enough.
When you give them the benefit of the doubt, are you feeling that in your body, like something? Do you have that little niggle in your body somewhere? You're like, this is off. Do you recognize that?
I do, but it's also a habitual thing because
Right.
I've been raised with that
Yep.
to turn over my power to
Yep. So true.
the other person.
Yep.
Yeah.
You know,
Me too.
in my relationship, men can do everything they want to.
Yeah.
But if you're a woman, you can't get angry and you can't, have your needs met by somebody else, which ultimately it's up to me to satisfy my own needs
It's so crazy.
and not necessarily everyone else.
Yeah, I mean, that's again, that's a statement of just how powerful society can program us, right? It's part of it is the time we grew up in, and also a lot of it's the place, right? I grew up in small town in western Nebraska, and so what you're describing sounds very familiar. I was a kid in the 70s and 80s, and that sounds even though I'm a man, it sounds pretty familiar to the sort of messaging that I was hearing when I was growing up, that I've had to like really think about and be like, okay, I grew up with this, but is this really where I'm at now for me? And I bump into this a lot. So you talk about that really reminds me of that.
Well, and like what you remind me of is like my own, like when I know I really want to say no to something and I can feel this part of me trying to talk myself out of it, or be like, it's almost like it's like a resistance, or like a holding of like I don't even know how to describe it. It's like the opposite of a no. And it feels like, but I shouldn't, and I can't, and I'm like, yeah, but we can say no now. And it's like I almost have to like because it's so much upbringing and so much pattern and so much to be like this doesn't feel right for me, or I don't feel safe in this situation, and that's enough. And this part's, well, yeah, but, and I'm like, remember, that's enough, right? And it's like reteaching ourselves to be like for me, to really simplify things of like something doesn't feel good. It's not so much about like, yes, I will do the work with, my relationships and stuff like that. But if it's this whole or bigger picture of like when I'm with somebody and something just doesn't feel good at all, if it's a new person or something like that, or I don't feel safe, that's enough.
Yeah.
Right. And I don't have to talk myself into, well, like if I'm in a relationship for a long time, I'm going to like work stuff out. Right. But if I'm just thinking about going forward with somebody, and I don't feel safe foundationally, I'm like, that's enough. And just like the practice
that's a pretty new concept though for you.
Yeah. Because before,
Barb, I guess my question is for you is so you are recognizing it. Are you shifting to the point where you're actually able to then execute the kind of like, hey, I need to change this relationship? Is that starting to happen for you now?
I did that last year, went through all my relationships
That's awesome.
and took a break from all of them because I had to realize I have
Mm.
to
Yeah.
love myself
Yeah.
enough
Again,
to interact with other people so that they're getting my true self
right.
to interact with them. And the linchpin for me happened when I cared more about somebody's survival than they did.
Hmm.
And I couldn't find self love for myself if I was with somebody who wanted to kill themselves all the time. So that everything got brought to a head. And so I just went through everything and I said, I got to take a break from everybody so I can unravel, my twisted self.
Right.
And find what's really true.
And, yeah.
It's amazing.
And so once you start asking yourself, is this loving to yourself?
Mm-hmm. And then making choices, which you did, and then you watched how that reorders your life, right?
Then the no feels really strong, and those people just back way out of my life.
Yep.
And we're both good on both sides because they're not coming at me expecting me to solve their issues and stuff like that.
This is the law of attraction in reality, right? It's not the red Corvette. It's this. It's like when you're not in your foundational no, you attract a certain kind of situation, and then when you are and you start to recognize and you start to change. I mean, life gives you some pushback sometimes, or most times, but then life starts to reorder because it has to.
It has to.
Yeah.
Yeah, because
that's incredibly powerful. I mean, because it's, again, that just reinforces everything that we've been talking about, and it's so practical. It's so real. It's so real.
It feels better to be in being able to say no and to love myself and put myself first.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think that opens everybody else to do the same.
Totally.
Well,
and then we're coming from true self to true self.
Yeah, because then you're leading by example, right? That vibration, it's vibrational. When you send out that vibration, it attracts different people that are meeting that vibration.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I'm grateful that I attracted you lovelies into my life because you guys are a fun dynamic for me. I appreciate that.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for joining. I love having these conversations. I love these examples. I love your example. I'm really appreciate that you sharing this with us because, again, it's real. This is life. How do you navigate these things, right? And you're talking about it. You're talking about your results, and you're talking about, when you didn't and you recognize it, you shifted courses. I mean, that's what's so cool about this. That's what I get. That's why we started this whole show. That's, when we started planning this a couple, well, I guess it's been 3 years ago now. That was really what we started really talking about, because we've been doing this, this conversation you get to see every 2 weeks is the conversation we've been having for years. And now we get to actually share it with everybody and have this kind of community conversation. That's pretty darn exciting.
Like talking with you guys about it. And, it's like we do these shows and we want to share topics, but like really what we want to create is this community, like this whole like camera and microphone and stuff. It's a way that we can reach out to you all at once and interact, right?
Yeah.
And so
and hearing your stories and hearing your actual boots on the ground situation is, to me, that's really fascinating. It's really interesting. And that's why I really appreciate the actual call in. I mean, by any communication, it's just awesome because then we can interact and discuss it and kind of explore it.
Thank you, love.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Well, anybody else have anything you guys want to share? Raise your hand or type in the Q&A, because I think we'll call it soon.
Yeah, if there's nobody else.
Shireen wrote some stuff.
Again, while she's looking at that, just to let you know, if you're watching on the replay of YouTube, and if you want to attend live, usually we simulcast this on Zoom, YouTube, and Facebook at the same time. Unfortunately, at this point with the technology, we're only taking questions via Zoom. So if you actually want to interact with us, just go to our website, livingyourowakening.com, and you can register for our show. It's free, and you just get a Zoom call that you can actually join and then interact, type in questions, and call.
Yeah.
Maybe at some point, I know we're looking at some other platforms that allow us to kind of aggregate everything. But right now, if you saw what was actually behind me in terms of electronics, there's a lot of balls in the air right now.
It's just interesting too, because of our topic today and just like getting the show ready, and then all this technology stuff happened like 5 minutes before the show opened, and we're like,
Yeah, it's crazy because we go through a pretty extensive. I was going through yesterday just testing everything, and we go through a very extensive list to verify everything's working. And literally, I would say, I
It
have
was
like
like 3
10
minutes
pieces,
before the
10 or
show.
15 pieces, like 15 minutes before the show, suddenly, for the first time
Yeah.
ever, stopped working. And so it's just like I think some aspects of energies around don't want us to talk about this, and
So
it's
it's
like, well,
empowering. Yeah.
fuck you. We're gonna
Yeah.
talk about this. I don't know how else to say this.
Balls to bones.
Balls to bones.
Yeah, so I feel like just kind of like when the show opened, just kind of, we were like deer in the headlights, right? And so the show is just kind of interesting for me to kind of like land and yeah. Because I don't like to pretend like, oh, I got it all together when I'm like, I clearly do not.
Yeah,
You know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah,
this is
the
not
house was
real.
collapsing
Yeah.
5 minutes before the show
Right.
opening. So
So Shireen said, I'm eager to listen to the replay. She asked when it is. So the replay of today's show will be up tomorrow at 10 a.m. Eastern on our
YouTube
Living Your Awakening YouTube.
channel. Yeah.
Yep.
We're gonna make this a podcast. I think a lot of people, that would be eventually, that was always the plan, is make it both an audio and a video podcast, both.
Mhm.
So that's still in the works. In terms of doing like shorter clips, I'm going to start doing that. I've been waiting to get some new hardware in because of just space constraints on my computer, so I can just do more editing more quickly. So that's something this new year we're going to be adding. And if you have any suggestions about either guests that you'd like to see or topics that you'd like us to talk about or explore, or just comments or general comments in general, just feel free to drop us a line, email, and let us know.
And when you sign up for the
Yeah,
shows too, you can write
you
it
can
in the
write a
notes.
comment.
Shireen shared that. She said, my sister and I were just talking about practicing saying no and giving ourselves permission that just because we can or could do the thing, if it's our truth, saying no, that is the most important. Even
Yes.
when it feels like saying no is torturous. Yup.
Yes.
And it's
That's a
such,
muscle you have to exercise.
oh my God, over and over.
And sometimes maybe it's never comfortable, right? Sometimes there's a situations where doing what's true is sometimes never comfortable.
Yeah, like for me, I'm pretty good at expressing what's true for me to people. And then there's just certain layers where I still, to this day, I get really scared and really uncomfortable. And over the last few years, I'm like, this may never go away. This may be what it is for the rest of my life. Okay, I'm still going to do it though,
Right.
but I might be sweating. Where other layers, I don't feel that way at all. I'm like, whatever, this is just what it is. But
Right.
yeah, it's really interesting. I'm like, oh, well. Yeah, she said, even when it, even when it feels torturous. And she said, and such a good practice to honor the no, because ultimately it honors everyone, not only yourself. True that, sister.
True.
Though the old habitual feels so intense, yes.
Especially during the holiday season.
Oh God.
Right. That's the Christmas crazies is my
Christmas
one of my coaches used to talk about, my acting coach.
She also just said, thank you very much for doing these shows and offering your insight, your experience, and just safe space to share and be very vulnerable with experimenting living our truth. Yeah, this is what that is, experimenting. So very grateful for you both. And I love to watch you both be present and join together for this with all of us. Thank you, Shireen.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, my loves, if nobody got nothing else to say, do you want to say anything else?
I just want to remind you, I was on the Three Intuitive Healers podcast. They interviewed me, Heather, Angela, and Stephanie, and I think that dropped November 19th. So look for that on Spotify or
Yeah, and I just
Apple.
emailed it too.
Oh yeah, I guess
Today's
you
email.
emailed it. So any podcast platform, they have, I think, 36 or 38 different episodes, and we've been on several, and it's like a really fun podcast being with them.
Yeah,
And so
it's totally
really,
a blast.
it's definitely worth a listen. So I encourage you to go over there and subscribe and support them.
Yeah, they're pretty awesome. I just want to see if there's anything I need to say. Well, one thing I want to say is I tuned in for a group this week, if there's going to be one this Friday, and there's going to be, and Spirit said, I wrote it down because I knew I would forget the exact phrase, but they basically said, your next step. And they showed me this image of this year being like this. Oops, I'm coming out of the screen. Being like this. And we just keep taking these steps and steps and steps and steps on so many levels, you know, to be who we are, to heal our stuff. But there's like this super deepening we're doing and empowering ourselves in a very specific way. And we're just taking these next steps. So this Friday, we're going to be doing a session on just helping you guys clear the old faster to take your next step. Be there. So that's coming. I get to write that out tomorrow. I think the only thing I want to say, which is always the hardest to say, is underneath it all, underneath all the tools that we share and just everything is like just this feeling that like we're okay. Like, even though we don't have it all figured out, even though we're all going through the stuff, deep down, like we're okay. Even though we don't know what the outcome of our lives will be, or situations in which we're working so hard to change, there's just this foundation of like, I've got me though, like I'm okay through it all. I'm okay through it all. And that's a practice, but that's one thing I want to say. Anything else you want to add to that?
I don't think so.
Okay. Well, my loves, thank you so much for being with us and hanging out with us and being there as we got our stuff together. And just love you. And we will see you in 2 Tuesdays from now. We'll send out the email. And you can always go to livingyourowakening.com and sign up for the next show anytime. And we see you then.
Bye-bye for now.
Bye-bye for now.